The poetry communities that I had been involved with were like forum style websites. And you would post your piece and you could add like visual elements to it, and then people would comment underneath your piece. And that's the style of poetry community that I had been used to for years, right? Because of Facebook groups that I was in for poetry, I started getting links to, the broadcast, and I wasn't really sure what it was. The time of night, I turn in early sometimes. So I finally listened in, and it was like discussions and shares. And I know myself, that's not something that I do in a group setting. I end up being behind the scenes, talking to people one-on-one about their pieces and collabing behind the scenes. I don't really do, the on-air part is kind of challenging for me. I don't really feel comfortable with that. I don't really do that. That's the introvert in me. But I will have a hours-long conversation with somebody if it's one-on-one. Especially if you're talking about what inspired a piece. I absolutely love that. I like being able to read the piece so that I can see the lines as well as hear them. I stumbled on Soul Cafe one night. Soul Cafe at that time, the format was different. It was more like a cipher. You would introduce yourself, spit your piece, you would be muted, and then they would put a song on. And it was just back to back to back like that. And then the second half, I think, was pick up your pen. So I was listening, and I finally decided to press 1 when Danielle guest hosted. I had been listening to her for a little while, and I noticed that whenever I heard her, I just felt really comfortable, right? So I finally pressed 1. She was guest hosting by herself because the other hosts were actually sick and not available. What I didn't know was that Pharrell was listening, right? So he heard me spit for the first time. I will never forget. I was after C-Dub and before J-Rob. Spit my piece, and I kind of immediately hung up. And then I just listened online for the rest of the show. I ended up getting a message from Pharrell later that night, and he was introducing himself, and he was just, giving really positive feedback. And he and I were just chatting back and forth for a while. Almost every day he would check in, and I think my intent was to call in the next show. But what happened was, when they came back to hosting, they changed the format. They literally changed the format on me, and so they started doing discussions after pieces. So I was like, nope, I will not be doing that. And so I think I may be mixed up. I think I got to, I got to share first when it was the original format. And then after I shared and talked to Pharrell, they changed the format and they started doing discussions. And so I was like, nope, I'm not going to be pressing 1 because I'm not trying to be on air discussing anything. And so they happened to get sick, and Danielle was hosting, and I was like, okay, even if she wants to do a discussion, I'm mad comfortable with her. That's how it happened. So I pressed 1 and I shared this piece that I wrote, and it was honestly the first piece that I had written in 5 years. And it was inspired by listening to one of their shows. And it was a topic that really got under my skin. It was kind of like a men versus women thing. And I started writing about, immediately, as soon as the show was over. I was up for 2 hours. And I wrote this piece that had to do with my personal journey with hypervigilance. And all of the things that sometimes as Black women, we have to be cautious of and watch. And it's all of the weight that we carry. So I wrote that piece, and that's the piece that I shared when Danielle was guest hosting, because I was like, okay, if she wants to talk about it, I actually can talk about it with her. but I wasn't used to reading my pieces. I was still used to that forum style where I wrote and read pieces, like just, to myself, and we would comment on the website. So that piece was a little bit longer, and I'm not used to reading it out loud. I don't really perform pieces necessarily, even now. But back then I was all kinds of green, so I felt like I was running out of breath and I was nervous. And so after I finished, Danielle was like, somebody wants to speak to you. And then she brings For Real on air, and he starts talking to me, and I was just like, oh my God. But I had already talked to him behind the scenes, so it was decent. And one of the things that I will never forget he was telling me was that, the thing that makes me nervous is actually what makes my presentation unique. The fact that I can sound a little bit breathy. He was like, your voice is that's your style. Don't not see the value in that. And then behind the scenes, we were talking about another one of the hosts who was nervous initially, and how his voice quality is a little bit like mine too. Like, he runs out of breath, but he uses that in his pieces. And so that's kind of something that I've been trying to work towards, like with a specific piece, like let myself run out of breath. I want to do that on purpose, especially if it lends to the emotional part of it.